something I used to do on this channel were reading wrap-ups. So at the end of the month, or every 2 months or something, I would get my list of books that I'd read that month and say something pretty brief about them and give them a review, basically. And I totally fell off of that, especially because I had started reading so much that it was really difficult to keep up. And then I also fell into a bit of a slump after that. So, now that I'm trying to get back into reading the books that I own, I decided I might as well do a bit of a review right after I finish reading it. So, I finished reading this book called Goblins by Charles Grant. It's one of the X-Files books, and I believe it is actually the first of the X-Files books. So, it's basically fan fiction, but that's okay, because it's like watching a X-Files episode, but as a book, which is kind of my greatest dream. I believe I gave this book a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, it's in my description. Oh, Jesus Christ. Gordon will not stop playing with my little tassel things. Stop it. I'm gonna tuck them away, and you're gonna have nothing to play with.
I caught him being a pervert.
He was playing with my little drawstrings, and he wouldn't stop. He was just yelling at me, so I had to do something.
He left as soon as I saw him do it.
What perverted thing was he doing?
He was just facing you. Like, I don't know.
He was probably gearing up to play with my hair. So, I started reading this book when I was homesick on Wednesday, and either on Wednesday or Thursday, I left it in the bed, and I got back in the bed, and I think I sat on it with the cover bent back. So then the day after, the cover actually fell apart. So yeah, now it's kind of dramatic.
Yeah, it's just like perfect.
It's like a...
It looks like you took scissors to it.
It's like a perfect score line. It's quite strange. I've never had this happen to me before. So like I said, I started this book on Wednesday, and I just finished it last night on Sunday. I read it kind of fast. I have a 52 book goal for this year, and I was like way ahead of schedule at the beginning of the year because I was like on a fucking tear, and then I fell off. So I think I'm only 1 or 2 books ahead of schedule now, so I need to catch up. So I need to read a book a week. So I'm trying. My thoughts about it. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 because I love the X-Files, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. It's kind of like if you watch the X-Files, it's a little bit dated in that some of it is quite sexist, and some of it is very problematic. So there's that, and there's some of that in this book as well. And the parts that I just didn't think were spot on were like Scully's internal thoughts. I don't know what my computer is doing. She thought a lot about her like own appearance and like her clothing. I just don't see Scully as somebody who thinks that much about it. That was one of my problems with it. I thought Mulder was written pretty well. There is the line, the breeze attacked his forelock, which I think just shows the image of Mulder walking out and the breeze just going through his hair, which is like spot on. I thought the secondary characters weren't very fleshed out. I actually got quite confused. I think there were 4 different people who were a part of this like military scientific experiment thing, and I didn't understand who the 4 different people were, and when they mentioned one, I didn't know who it was. So it got a little bit confusing for me, and that might have been part of me reading it when I was sick. And there is a character who I find wholly unlikable in this book. And he basically seems like, what do you call it? Like a sexual assaulter type person to Scully, or like kind of like aggressive towards her. He has a past history of this, and then it's kind of like a funny thing in the book, which I didn't like at all. But it is fine that he's unlikable. You're not necessarily supposed to like him, but Mulder likes him, which I don't like. I'm not really gonna go into a plot summary. The word goblins is just in this book a lot, which is very fun. It is one of the reasons why I picked up this book instead of the Antibodies book, is because it is called Goblins. And I was kind of hoping for like a forest setting with actual fucking goblins, but that didn't happen. So if you're looking for that, that's not what it is. It is not goblins. I don't see how it is goblins, kind of at all. So just be warned, it's not goblins. How's the framing? Not good. Alright, I give my dog a calm, so I have limited time where she is distracted. So I finished this book on Memorial Day. Don't remember when I started it, but it was about a week ago. And I'm also realizing if I read one book off of my bookshelf each week, then I can take a picture of it for Bookstagram. So then I'll both have one post per week, and I'll be reading a book every week. So that's my plan. Is it all the way back here that I'm in focus? So the book that I read was The World of Null-A, which I will put back here by my head where it is in focus. This book I've had for a long time, and I'm not sure when I got it or where I got it. It is a really, really, really beat up book. Almost all of the pages fall out of it. So some of them are loosely bound to each other, but some of them are also completely loose. That was a bit of a treat while I was trying to read this in bed, as I was falling asleep, having pages fall on me. So this is one of the first like older sci-fi books that I've ever owned, though. And it does have some annotations in it from whoever read it before me. One of the annotations that was in this was like, they're talking about some war strategy, and there were analogs to like, oh, is this an analog to Vietnam? Is this an analog to the USSR? And stuff like that. So it was pretty interesting to see those. There's only a few sections of very, very light annotation. So overall, I thought the book had a pretty strong start. Very classic sci-fi setting of future Earth, Venus is colonized, and the premise from the beginning was pretty interesting. Like, in the very beginning, this guy dies. The main character, like, punches a lady and then he dies. That's what I recall from, like, the first section. It was like, oh shit, now he's on Venus? This is interesting. Yeah, and the concept from the beginning was quite interesting. And then it just fell downhill real quick. There just kept on being like more and more like weird shit introduced, and then in like the last 10 pages there's like a new technology called a vibrator, which is weird. At the very end I was like, oh my god, I'm almost done with this book and nothing has been resolved. It was very frustrating. So I looked up some of the history about this book, and I guess it was like in smaller serialized chunks, and then it was put into this book. And also, when it was first printed, it the Null-A was like a Null-A symbol, and then to cut down on like the price to print that, they've just replaced it with Null-A in my version. This is one of the, I think it is the first sci-fi that was published and available as a hardback after World War II. But yeah, really the plot falls apart completely. Nothing gets resolved and you will not be happy about it. But it has some cool concepts. Clover has finished her Kong and is now sniffing around over here, if you can hear her. I was disappointed by it. Holy could have used a lot more fucking editing. Just structural edits up the wazoo. Figure out what the fuck is happening in your book. Don't just release it as an unfinished piece of shit. Oh yeah, on page 188, this is a 190 page book. There's a little glimmer of, oh no, absolutely nothing will be resolved. Which you already know, because there's not enough room to do it. And it says, he realized that this was life itself he was experiencing. Life in which nothing was ever fully explained. He was free, and this was victory. Come on, dude. You're gonna summarize exactly how I feel about this fucking book. I'm free of it. I don't have to read it anymore. So disappointing. I mean, it's not like I kind of knew it was gonna be disappointing. I've read enough of, like, this older style sci-fi to know, like, it's kind of disappointing. Treatment of female characters was bad, obviously. I mean, that's not obvious. In a lot of these books, the treatment of female characters is absolutely terrible. This one also, in the first, like, few pages, also there's so much gagging and tying up of people in general, and it's fucking weird. So anyway, in the first bit, he meets this woman, and she's like, I'm trying to be a real smart lady and win a good position from the game machine. And he's like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to teach you anything, you dumb bitch. So anyway, it was so bad. It was kind of fun to read. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Last night I finished reading the story of Dr. Dolittle, the Dover Children's Thrift Classics version, which at the beginning does note that it is slightly abridged. Some of the original illustrations and passages were, like, super fucking racist, so they removed them. So I'm grateful that those were removed, because I wouldn't want to read that, to be perfectly honest. Already I felt like it was kind of a problem. It's very short. The illustrations were kind of fun to look at. Some of them were really good. Let me find a bad one. This one is very strange. But a lot of the other ones are actually very, very pleasant looking, and at the beginning of each chapter, like, the first letter of the text is actually a little illustration. So that was really fun, just from like a illustration and design perspective. That was really neat. So compared to something like the Wizard of Oz books, I prefer those to this. And this one has very little substance, and they are traveling to different places, and he's doing various veterinary deeds to animals and all that. It's not incredibly interesting to me. I do have another Dolittle book. It's I think the travels or the journey or something of Dr. Dolittle. So I probably will read that. It's much longer than this one, so maybe it has more substance to it. But yeah, compared to something like a Peter Pan or Wizard of Oz, this one is lacking. I gave it, I think, a 2 out of 5, mostly because of the racism. And the day before yesterday, I also finished reading the Amber Spyglass, which is the last book in the His Dark Materials, I believe is what the series is called. And I also believe it is the last book. There are some other books that are in that world, with the main character and everything. So I didn't review The Golden Compass or The Subtle Knife because I haven't been filming my reading wrap-ups, but I did read those two fairly recently, and then I just finished the Amber Spyglass. So the Amber Spyglass is weird because it's following quite a lot of people in quite a lot of different worlds, and the environments are very different, so it's kind of jarring to switch from one place to the other, or like one character to the other. But besides that, I actually really did enjoy it. I know this is compared to like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or like the Chronicles of Narnia books, as like the anti-religion version of like children's books. And I am not a religious person, and although I did enjoy reading, to a point, I did enjoy reading the Chronicles of Narnia books up until the point where I think I'm on the 5th book or something of that series. I haven't finished it. And like the Wrinkle in Time books, I thought was like an interesting thing to read for me because I didn't read them as a child. And now these books too, also reading them not as a child, they don't really have any impact on me in forming my own thoughts on the subject. It is a little heavy-handed, but I also do really think it's a cool idea to have like a bad or evil god. I don't know if I'm giving too much away. Sorry if I am, but there's this angel, this like big ruling angel, that's like taken over for God, or whatever the name of the god angel is, and his name is Metatron. And that just cracks me up. It was interesting to see like all of that stuff be real in this fantasy world, but also be bad. So yeah, I thought the series in general was pretty cool. I do happen to I find myself liking books where the setting is either like hell or purgatory. I find or like the afterlife, I find that very interesting. So this book has, spoilers, quite a lot of that element to it. So I think that's why I quite enjoyed those elements of this book. I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I think I gave each book in the series a 4 out of 5. Overall, I thought they were pretty interesting. They have cool concepts. Hello! What? So I just finished reading Fight Club last night. Yes, last night. So, here it is. I had read half of it like quite a long time ago, and I just decided to pick up from where I was because I have seen the movie, so it's not like I could forget what was happening. My thoughts on it. I have seen some reviews because on Goodreads, when I'm evaluating how I feel about the book, sometimes I like to see what other people have to say that's negative, so that if I actually agree with that, I might rate it a little bit lower even if my overall impression was good. Some of the criticism was that the book wasn't successful in getting across what it was trying to, assuming that what it was trying to get across is that the whole Tyler Durden message is actually stupid. I thought it got that across pretty well, if that is indeed the point that the book was trying to get across, which that gets into like a whole thing about like the author's intentions and stuff. And I've heard some shit about the author, but I honestly love the story of Fight Club, and I love like the characters are super interesting. I adore the movie. I'd say that like Pineapple Express and Fight Club are probably my favorite movies. Fight Club, it's kind of difficult just because it's such a hyped movie. I really wanted to read the book. I wanted to read the book when I was in high school, and I went to my library and they didn't have this book there, but they did have, I think, Choke, and the beginning of that was very graphic for me as a child. Not a child, I was a high schooler, whatever. But I was like, I don't know if I'm meant to read adult books. I give it a 5 out of 5. I really like this book. I'm itchy and my hair is bad. So there are some key differences between the book and the movie that I just wasn't expecting. I really wasn't expecting there to be that much of a difference, which there isn't in like essence that much of a difference, but oh my god, Gordon's totally stolen my spot. You want to see him? There he is, the bastard. There's just some sound. I was trying to figure out what it was. Oh yeah, so it makes it like kind of more grim in a way. Comparing the book and the movie, I think I prefer the movie. I just really think that Brad Pitt does such an amazing job as Tyler Durden that if I didn't have that in my head reading this book, I don't think it would have been as good. So I'm just gonna say I think the characters in the movie really sell this book. I just thought it was very good. It's very dark. It's very, like, gross. I forgot to mention this yesterday. I wanted to talk about the story of Dr. Dolittle. One element of it that I thought was pretty interesting was because this veterinarian is with all of these animals and he goes to kind of cure the illness of a bunch of monkeys in Africa. He is very bad with money because his customers are animals. And like, sure, he has human customers with their animals, but mostly he's just treating animals who can't pay him. And so, like, the main struggle in this book is really just him not having any money and needing it for his society that he lives in. And I thought that was kind of interesting because he is like a British man who lives in British society and needs money to live. And of course, like, it goes pretty well for him because he's the protagonist. Like, he ends up finding a way to make a lot of money and have it not really be a problem. But I thought that that was like an interesting element, especially for a children's book where kids don't really have or value money. I mean, they might nowadays, but like, in general, kids don't really understand or value money like adults do. So, yeah, that was interesting. Oh yeah, I'm currently reading the third Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book. I can't remember what it's called anymore. So I think this is going to be the end of my reading wrap-up because I've covered a few books that I read this month. I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this kind of format, let me know. I think it's easier for me to talk about the books when I've just read them.